Okay, I think we should be good to go.
Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. Awesome. Okay. So this week we have the pleasure to welcome Vincent. So I don't know if we need to introduce Vincent. Vincent is an alumni from the lab. He used to be a PhD student here. He got his PhD from UDM and with Liam. And yeah, he's now a researcher at IREC at Hydro-Québec. And this week we'll be taking a break from robot learning to discuss the impact of robotics on the SDGs. So the floor is yours, Vincent. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sasha. So today we're going to talk about the role of robotics related to the SDGs. We'll talk about what are the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and how robotics can be both enabler and inhibitor of that, and how can we analyze that. So as you said, I'm just going to introduce myself really quickly also. I'm currently a researcher in AI at IREC, the Hydro-Québec Research Center, but I did my PhD at Mila in the Robotics and Embedded AI Lab, so I know half of the people here, maybe more than half. But also during my PhD, I was also a research assistant at the Agora Lab, which is the AI ethics lab. And my work that I'm going to present was from both of these roles that I had. And before I did a master's in robotics. So the motivation of the research that we did is comes from very far from me, but I think that's also the case for a lot of people, researchers have talked about, why do we do what we do? What's the interest of doing research? Why do we do research? And kind of the general answer that we have for that is research is about creating knowledge, and this knowledge is useful to tackle some of the society's challenges. And this it's very interesting, but I was interested in digging deeper. And try to see how does that apply to robotics. So in particular, does robotics help tackle these challenges, or does it contribute to make some of these challenges harder? Because we often hear also bad effects of technology one way or another, and robotics also. So how do we try to understand that? How do we try to analyze that? And so there was a need for a framework methodology to try to understand and dig deeper into this topic. For example, try to understand which challenges exactly are we talking about, and how do we measure or evaluate the impacts of research and development in robotics on this challenge. So I was having discussions, and I got the very nice opportunity to join a team that was already trying to think about this. And this group of researchers, they decided to go through the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So what are the Sustainable Development Goals? It's a group of 17 goals that was introduced and created by the United Nations in 2016. The objective is to bring peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. It's big objectives. There's 17 of them. They go from no poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education. I'm going to name all of them because they're quite interesting. Gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure, reduce inequalities, sustainable cities, responsible consumption, and then climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, and partnerships. So there's a lot of things from in there. There's a lot of things about development, which is let's develop, let's have more industry, innovation, let's have better work with economic growth. There's a lot of things about sustainability, and sustainability both environmental side, climate action, life below water, life on land, and also societal sustainability, such as reducing inequalities, gender equality, education. So there's a lot of things that are coming to these goals. The targets, when they adopted it 8 years ago, was to achieve them in 2030. That's in 6 years, and we're not nowhere close to achieving a lot of them. But in order to define what achieving means, there was different targets for each goal. So in each goal is subdivided in between 5 and 10 targets. So overall, from the 17 goals, there are 169 targets that make up these goals. So knowing that, the team thought, and I think it makes sense, that it can be a good framework to identify the opportunities and impacts of robotics. Why? Because these define what there is kind of a consensus in the UN about the society's challenges. And so it's okay, that this defines what are the challenges, in the first question we have. So it's one definition, but it can be quite interesting. So I'm gonna also want to introduce the team of people that I was working with, because I think it was very interesting how multidisciplinary it was, while still being focused on robotics. So we had people working from a bit different places in the world, a lot from Europe, but also India, Egypt, Canada. And there were people working on self-healing robotics, on self-robotics, some people on health robotics, some people on using robots for women's empowerment and gender equality, some people working on smart mobility, industrial robots, governance, AI ethics, human-robot interaction in health and workspace. And that was me, who was working in AI robotics and also AI. So it was a very interesting group of people that I learned a lot from working with them. And the first thing that we thought when we got grouped together is like, we have no idea about all the things that are being done in robotics in the world, in research. And so it's going to be very difficult to kind of see, to make a paper that makes, or analysis that makes sense, that not is exhaustive, but that represents actually what is done. So the first thing that we decided to do, and that was also very nice advice from Liam, by the way, who contributed to that, was to organize a workshop at IROS, where we tried to invite the community in robotics to tell us what they've been doing. So it was a workshop organized in 2021, the role of robotics in achieving the UN SDGs. The first thing that, there was two phases. One phase was inviting contribution. The objective, giving a space for people to propose the work to showcase the work they've been doing in whether proposing applications of robotics that do go towards the SDGs or analyzing the effects of robotics on the SDGs. I have two, there was several, I have two that I really like. This one that is about addressing the sustainability of the Adriatic Sea using marine robots. So this one you have like a mix of like underwater robots, like floating robots that try to understand the ecosystems in the Adriatic Sea and understand also the challenges that it's going through. And this one, which is the role of medical logistics drones in support of healthcare, in particular, where they use drones to send goods to people that need some medical goods in emergency. But this paper is not about saying look how good it is. It's more, there's a lot of lessons we need to learn because the way we do it is not great. So there was also, it was very interesting, a lot of insights in that. On top of that, we also organized some panels on different topics with a lot of experts in many fields. And I think that was a very, very interesting discussion that really broadened our space on how, on what we needed to do. And from that, we published a first paper, which was pretty much, kind of not a summary, but like an executive summary of what was said during this meeting. And I want to, and it's the final idea of the motivation for the paper that we did, that I will present a bit afterwards, is that during this workshop, a couple of things were clear. First, that there's many opportunities that robotics have to enable the SDGs, but also there's undesired effects. That was not a surprise, I knew that, that's very clear. But also there's a lack of awareness about robotics for decision makers. Sometimes there's opportunities and they're not taken. But then on the other hand, there's also a lack of awareness about the SDGs in the robotics community, and sometimes there's things that could be done in order to put these two communities together. Right now, it's kind of an obstacle to capitalize on these opportunities. And the other thing is that in order to support the development and the deployment of robotics towards the SDGs, but also prevent the inhibiting impacts of robots, there will need to be governance. And in order for this governance to be done correctly, it's important to establish a common language between the decision makers and the robotics community and the SDGs community. So this was part of the objective of the work that we did, which was very much, in order to continue this and to check all these things, we need to make a more thorough survey that try to identify the enabling and inhibiting potential of robotics, and from that draw some conclusions and discuss all these topics. So that's pretty much the big motivation from the work that we've been doing. We also had an inspiration, because we needed some methodology and we had no idea how to do that. So we looked at another paper that was made by Ricardo Vinoesa and his collaborators that was pretty much doing the same kind of review that we wanted to do, or survey we wanted to do, which is, but focus on AI. So the role of artificial intelligence in achieving the SDGs. It was published in Nature Communications in 2020. And the way they did it is what we call a consensus-based expert elicitation. Pretty much you ask several experts to first use a grade or rank things on their side, then get together and then agree. You don't get out of the room until you agree, pretty much. So it's a consensus-based expert elicitation process. And so it was an inspiring methodology, and we decided let's apply something very similar to robotics. I'm not going to go too much in detail. Actually, I have different slides, but when I made a mock presentation, I realized I don't have the time. So I'm going to very quickly go through the big steps of the methodology. The way we did it is first we built a database to identify the impacts of each of the 150 targets. I said 150 before there was 169. The last SDG, which is about collaboration to enable the SDGs, we didn't find it really relevant regarding robotics, so we pushed it away. So we have 16 and 150 targets now. So we built a database to identify this. How did we do that? We assigned 2 researchers per SDG, and we just told them, look, try to find something. And there's very low threshold on credibility, just try to find everything you can and put everything in this database. And the second level, then we ask them, okay, now that you have kind of a knowledge and a database about and a lot of data about each SDG, write a summary, 2 paragraphs summary of what did you find. This allowed to get a structured and nuanced formulation that was more interesting than just a database, that was already like structuring everything in order to have kind of an idea of the impact per SDG. But we wanted to go a bit further and go to make sure that what we're saying makes sense. So then we went through a literature review. So every claim, every impact that was claimed in the paragraphs, we split it, and then we tried to make a literature review to see if that makes sense. We went all the way to, I think, 319 references that we found in this literature, in this review. And from that, that's kind of consolidated, but that also allowed us to find new things, because of course, when it's a trend, right? You find something else, that's interesting, you find something else. Finally, we decided to weight that's pretty much where we went in order to the qualitative part. Then we decided to try to find a way to quantify. So in order to quantify, it's a bit harder because you try to quantify things that are not inherently numerical. But the way we did is we first weighted each impact by its significance. That means, like, is it like an anecdotal thing that you find, or someone who theoretically said that robotics could be useful, or is it the commercial products that are released there, right? And there were like different levels on the spectrum, but that was kind of the idea. And then we quantified for each target of the SDGs. We looked at which impact was the best related, if it was directly related, and then we used the weight of the impact significance to put it together. So that's the way we kind of quantified how robotics can impact each of the targets of the SDGs. And then finally, we made an average, pretty much, and that's how we got a score per SDG. So here's the whole thing. I'm gonna report. Okay, so I'm gonna go very fast in the methodology details. I have some examples, but it's not important. Here. So here's the final result, right? In the quantification. I want to say that the quantification is really an exercise to kind of have an idea, but the more interesting part is more in the qualitative for each paragraph, which I'm going to go through afterwards. But what do we see here? For each, we have 2 plots. One of them is the enabling impacts. The other one is the inhibiting impacts that we identified, right? And they're per SDG. They're usually sorted in 3 categories: the society, environment, and economy SDGs, right? And we have kind of a spider plot in the middle. The darker one is the one that is weighted by the significant weights that I talked about. The light one is the one where we don't weight. We just take any kind of a document that supports kind of the claim, but we don't weight so much. So the more interesting part is the dark one. So what do we see? Well, first of all, according to the way we grade it, there's enabling impacts on 46% of the targets, inhibiting impacts on 19%. So yeah, it's probably better. That's good. More interestingly, I think there's definitely in the society thing. There's really big things for hunger in with agricultural robotics, healthcare, education, but this one I don't like it so much. We're going to talk about it later on. Energy, infrastructure, growth, economical growth, and infrastructures. And in the environmental ones, there's also some very interesting things that can be done. On the inhibiting impacts, we have strong inhibiting impacts on the environmental part. We're going to talk about it too. Yeah.
Well, actually, I'd like to talk about the enabling impacts a bit more, because there's still some interesting stuff there too. Like, I'm trying to look at some of the outliers where, like, the colored region happens to be really big, like sort of the shaded region versus the green region.
Yeah.
And even though there's a lot of work in that area, it's not having much impact.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm looking at like the red one in the top middle.
This one?
Yeah, which I don't know what that's.
That's poverty.
Poverty.
Yeah. And then there's these ones too, I guess. This one, which is gender equality, which is one that's very difficult to kind of see something. But we're going to go in detail for each of them actually afterwards. Okay. So if you want, we can like discuss each of them particularly. Yeah.
So if I understood the methodology correctly, it's based on like what is currently being done in the robotics community.
Yeah.
So do you have any way of measuring like impact, like potential future impact, or something like that?
Yes. So the way we did was not saying currently these are the impacts. We're saying these are current trends in robotics or current papers that we've seen, applications that have been imagined or commercialized, and how do they relate to the impacts. So it's like kind of in middle ground. We're not saying these are the current impacts. This is the current robotics and how they could relate to the future in the future to impacts, because they're not correctly put together.
Okay.
That's kind of the
second question. Do you think the fact that the inhibiting impacts are smaller than the enabling impacts could be due to like a bias towards doing research?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll talk about it afterwards in the discussion. But yes, there's definitely big bias in the literature right now, because nobody shows effect. There's a lot of reasons why the inhibiting impacts are less documented, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to go over some of the symbols too, because the enabling impacts, most of them seem to be aligned with capitalism. They're like big in the green area there.
Yeah.
There's like food, I think, is the yellow one on the top right.
Yeah.
I guess the ocean shows up. I suppose that's good, but I bet there's a link between food and the ocean. What are the bottom two right ones that are?
This one?
More to the right. I guess what says 21 next to it?
This one?
Yeah.
This one is sustainable cities.
Yeah.
Is this just for the particular robots and robotic methods that were developed, or is it more of is there also like a holistic view of the whole thing? For example, for the oceans, if you're going to massively robots to help with hunger, you're also going to pollute the heck out of the oceans. So is that like?
Yeah, so that was kind of considered, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you'll see when we go one by one, you'll see, and there's probably things missing, but that's what we kind of.
Okay.
One that I find interesting is the other very big places where there's kind of inhibiting effects, actually in poverty, inequalities. That's really, I think, an important thing on peace and decent jobs, and on equality, gender equality.
Yeah, sorry, there's been a lot of questions, but I just want to make sure I understand the percentage here, right?
Yeah.
So this can be understood as like a credibility score, like on total amount of documents, what's kind of the ratio that you guys trust, or?
Yeah. And then we take, for each SDGs, we look at all the targets.
Yeah.
We rate how robotics impacts each target. Then we make an average on all. So there's a big hypothesis that every target is as important as the other. Which is also a bias, like a problem in the methodology, but we don't know how to do otherwise.
And there's no like effect size here, right? So if it's enabling, it's considered.
So when we put together an impact and a target, we had the option to lower the score if we found that it was indirectly related.
Okay.
So we will like lower, say, okay, yeah, maybe a bit, but okay, that's not super relevant. It's still a bit, so we'll put the lower score.
Okay.
So yeah, we did kind of that.
Okay.
So what I propose afterwards is to go through each of the SDGs that we saw and look at pretty much what each paragraph says, because I think this is actually quite interesting. Normally we start with the economy, then social, then environment, but because I wanted to change, because I'm tired of environment being last, we'll put it first. So in this case, we'll talk about first the four environmental SDGs. The first one in the list is clean water and sanitation. And in this one, the results is really clear. It can really enable a lot of the targets. There's really nothing bad that it can do. And so more importantly, so clean water and sanitation, the objective, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. That was the goal. And clearly, robots can monitor the quality of water and the development of algal blooms. They can clean tanks and inspect critical infrastructures, not only the ones that are protecting the drinking water resources, but also the ones that are called endangered, so pipelines, dams, things like this. So these are the big impacts that it can have. On the lower interesting thing, but still quite fun, they can clean beaches, they can remove plastic from the rivers. It's less of a big impact because it's harder to deploy at a large scale, but there's definitely something else, and even less big, but still nice, clean some toilet boils and encourage some hygiene in the bathroom in general. So these are like, this is probably most of the easiest one, good things that can happen, no bad things. There's one about climate action. So in climate action, we see that we enable at 47, there's a 20% inhibitor, so that's quite big. In climate action, there's two things. That's first, combat climate change and also combat its impacts. So we first start with the impacts. The robots can support resilience and adaptation to climate change. So when, especially in case of disasters, there's a lot of search and rescue that can be done with robotics. There's a lot of monitoring and mapping, both short-term, when there's something happening, long-term, trying to understand the long-term evolution of ecosystems or places. And there's also facilitating the mitigation strategies, first for monitoring the greenhouse gas emissions, for example, with drones that can fly like above places and try to map everything with cameras. There's also the alternative in transportation. Here I'm talking mainly about, for example, autonomous trains, autonomous buses, things that can help also give some alternatives. Planting trees, maybe, if we manage to make it big enough, that's a bit maybe less of a like there's a couple of robots that do that, but it needs to be proven that it can be put at scale. And there's also a role in sustainable energy, but this we're going to talk in the other SDG. But they can also have negative impacts, usually indirectly, by encouraging the attractiveness of high emission industries. For example, there's a lot of underwater exploration, offshore operations for the fossil fuel industry that is like led through robotics, and so that can be a negative impact. We're talking also about a lot about autonomous cars. That's also going to encourage the use of these kind of cars, and also the perimeter itself. And imagine you deploy a ton of robots, then it also demands by itself more energy, and then you need to fuel it, and that's also good. So this is the way pretty much we did this. Yes.
I feel like it's not just more energy, it's like making the robots themselves is so costly for the environment. It's kind of ridiculous. You know, cobalt mines are so damaging.
Absolutely. But here we have, you'll see we talked about it in the other one. We really have to focus here purely climate. Okay. The other one is more like life on Earth, the one you're talking about. And yes, we mentioned it too. Okay. So, and it's also e-waste and everything. Life below water, this one is about, well, as you can imagine, conserve and use and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. In this case, we kind of have something a bit different, but we talk about ecosystem protection, so that's detection of the violation of marine laws, mapping and monitoring the coast, gathering new scientific knowledge for improved decision making by having robots going under the sea and trying to understand what's happening there. Enable some kind of restoration by regulating solid waste, cleaning rivers where we talk about it, hunting invasive species. There's a couple of examples when you have robots that are go under the water and when they see a fish they don't like, they shoot it. And there's also like reducing the impact of human activities. We talked about it already with the critical infrastructures. Can also be enabling sustainable fishing practices, for example. So when there's fishermen that go, sometimes having some robotics equipment can also help them, not target the bad kind of fishes. But they can also, on the other hand, amplify negative impact of industries. For example, through underwater exploitation, we talked about it before. Automating unregulated or badly regulated fishing practices that then will make things worse. Or automating, for example, the pollution of land agriculture practices, where then this goes usually with the rain, it washes out and gets into the sea or the lakes. So once again, we have a lot of enabling things, but we also have a significant amount of inhibition. Life on land is pretty much the same kind of things, where we have also monitoring, evaluating and understanding the ecosystem, detecting invasive species, detecting illegal activities such as poaching, illegal logging, mining, things like this. Same for restoration. There's actually some people who make some very robotic bees, which are quite good. I don't know also how scalable it is, but it will be interesting. Importantly, also reduce the impact of human activities, especially in agriculture, with things like precision irrigation. That can be very interesting. And we can also amplify negative impacts of industry, such as detecting primary resources for exploitation, the same as before, detect animals of interest for poaching, or help detecting law enforcement agents for people that do illegal activities. I remember you think it's actually in the sustainable consumption that we put it, but it's there somewhere. Yes.
No, you go first, Sasha.
Okay, so there are a lot of things about monitoring here. So
Yes.
monitoring invasive species or monitoring various conditions. So are we talking about like drones here or satellites? Like how is it implemented in practice?
It can be drones. It can be so in that case, for example, it can be drones. It can be also it can be also a robot that just like go through, for example, wheel robots that go and map the surroundings.
Okay.
Can be underwater. That one can be underwater robots that also map, for example, if I should dams. For example, we do that in Hydro-Quebec. For example, there's underwater robots that go and make sure that the dam is not broken. Things like this.
Okay.
So it's a bit everything that you can find. There's also in there's an example that is not there, but I think in offshore stations, you can also have robots that go there and monitor things. Whereas it's a very dangerous environment for humans, you can have a robot with things like this.
Okay. I still have at least two questions. One's hard, one's maybe more related. So I guess, is there a plan to deal with the negative effects of robotics? Is there going to be some sort of anti-robotics AI bill that's going to come up?
As far as I know, not really. I think a lot of these negative impacts are not due to the robotics itself. Robotics is a kind of a catalyzer to other kind of industries, other kind of interests that are robotic. So if you want to, if you see that robotics, help detecting primary resource for exploitation, and that can impact the life on land, then the problem is exploitation of natural resources in a given way, not the fact that you use robots for that. But robots can make it easier to do so if there's no regulation, then you're fine. And we talk about it in the governance part afterwards. That's actually how do we get the most of the SDGs with robotics or technology in general, and while preventing the worst parts. It's a tough conflict. Yeah.
Wait, so capitalism's been the problem the whole time?
There you go.
Oh my God.
So then I guess my other question related to this, and maybe is a good time to ask this. So if you take all of the data that you've collected right now, and I'm just curious, if you multiply this by AI, the distribution, does this get better or worse? Like basically, will introducing AI for robotics be an overall like positive for the green colors here that are good for enabling versus inhibiting?
Yeah, I think it will be for both. It's just that it just makes every impact of robotics more important because they can just do more. I don't know if it makes sense. Like you can do the same thing, but more efficiently, better. And so we didn't assume that the robots were absolutely limited. We just, by the current limitations of reasoning or understanding perception and everything, we just said, okay, imagine you could, there's some people who try to do robots for life who didn't see, does it work very well or no? What are the limitations? And I will say, okay, there's some people trying to do that. So I assume that if you use AI, usually in robots, it will allow them to do things that currently they're not absolutely able to do, but the general application is already kind of figured out. That's kind of the assumption. I think. But this paper was made in 2022, published in 2023. Obviously, in 5 years, things will change, and it will not be the same exactly. We're going to pass into the economy section. So that was the environmental one. Now we go to the economy, and that's one that is also where there's also a very big inhibitor possibility there. It's decent work in economic growth. That's quite interesting because we both have obviously a lot of things that go towards economic growth, simply because you can have plastic automation. You also can have a lot of improvement of the employment conditions and inclusivity. for example, through automation of tedious and dangerous tasks, collaborative robots, or assistive robotic exoskeletons that help people that will not be able to do the work to do that work, or people who will hurt themselves at work to not hurt themselves. So there's some very good things that can happen. But, and obviously, you can precipitate the disappearance of some physical jobs, of certain jobs, many physical ones, that usually require a lower level of education, so it's a particularly vulnerable part of society that can lose their jobs. So that's definitely a big negative impact that can happen there. And it can also change the content of the job itself, which also might not be good in some cases. Yes.
So, sorry, just to clarify, I know you went over this, but the percentages at the bottom don't reflect like the size of the impact, right? It's just like how many of the targets they affect. Because it feels like if you were incorporating size, like the inhibitor should be a lot larger. So
that's one of the problems, which is that every target is considered as important as each other.
Okay.
But during the targets, you have some of them that might have a very big impact on the way we see decent work and economic growth, and it's not reflected in the way we analyze. And it is a problem in the way we do it, for sure. In the section industry, innovation, infrastructure, that's another one, an easy one when we don't find any negative things, but things are getting a bit similar now. To talk about increasing industrial productivity, feeding the need of skilled workers when we face labor shortages, also access other places, hazardous places, and within difficult conditions, and inspect and monitor buildings and infrastructure. So that's in general a good thing for it. Reduce inequality. This one is one of the only ones when we have stronger inhibitor than enabler. And it's about reducing inequality within and among countries. Within countries, there's the good things is that you can promote social and economic inclusion, especially of pieces of parts of the society that currently are not included. For example, people with physical disabilities, that you can use prostheses, assistive robots to help them get into the work market or do the tasks that they would like to do. So there's definitely a big interesting thing here. There's also some social robots that have been shown to be very good with some kind of, for example, children with autism that might prefer to interact with robots sometimes. So that's good. In the bad, obviously, especially economically, you can increase inequalities within countries. For example, simply because robots, in order to have them work for you, you need to make a significant investment. That only gives access to very big capital owners, and it's hard to compete for smaller capital owners. So you get, but once you get it, you get a very big drive in productivity. So that's just in that side, it's a problem. And also it will lead to decreasing wages or unemployment for less educated workers. So that's another problem. It also increases inequalities among countries because this kind of process that can also lead, for example, to reshoring, relocation of work operation facilities. And it's been shown that the job losses due to robotization are mainly right now in low-wage countries where now the companies moving them back because they can do things with robots in their own soil. They don't need to pay anyone to do it. So that can be a problem. So that's one of the most important inhibiting potential. Responsible consumption and production. Now it's the idea of ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. That doesn't mean much, but the idea is, we can support, with robots, you can support local and flexible production of goods, reducing the impacts of transportation, providing custom products, can reduce food waste. Interestingly, first of all, through precision selection when you harvest. Also, when you handle food in the supply chain, especially fruits, using stealth robotics can actually make things you reduce waste there. You can use domotics also for responsible consumption. Interestingly, there's also more sustainable agricultural models that can be enabled by robotics, precision farming, weed removing robots, things like this, and also in waste treatment. So recycling centers, things like this, using robots make them better, better in general. But it can be difficult, challenging to produce robots sustainably, especially because of rare earth elements that Charlie, you were mentioning. And also, when you at the end of the life cycle, it produces some e-waste that is difficult to process. So in both terms, there's an inhibiting possibility here.
I think there's also a lot of, like in terms of food waste, like even right now we do food waste without robotics.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the dumpster behind any grocery store, it's going to be full of a bunch of stuff that's just a day old. That's more or less perfectly fine.
Yeah. Well, the idea is like we could do better if we had robotics in order to, like, not only in the grocery store, but for example in the supply chain. There's a lot of foods that are damaged by people taking them, or robots that are not correctly that do not correctly take them in, and then they damage them, and they're not proper for selling. Then you can imagine better robots for soft robotics, for example, that take them. Actually, it's currently being produced and commercialized, soft robotics to take them and to minimize the food waste in the supply chain, for example. Now we go to the big section, the society one. And it starts with something that's actually quite economical, which is no poverty. And once again, this is one where there's a strong inhibiting factor, and you can probably see it coming, but also strong enabling factor. So it's a bit both of them. The good thing that you can do is to reduce the price of goods, right? By being more productive, you reduce the price of goods. That makes it that it's easier for everyone to access them. So you reduce poverty that way. And you can also, and that's not a structural solution, but you can also provide in very high poverty, acute poverty situations, you can drop goods in hard to reach areas. There's some drones that do that. It's kind of a plaster, but it can help. But, and we talked about it before, it can amplify social vulnerabilities and inequalities. And as a result, because we currently do not have an ideal model for revenue sharing for anything that is generated by robots, that will also lead to more poverty if not handled correctly. So it's a risk. Yeah.
Did you guys talk about UBI at all in this agreement?
Yes, actually. When we talk about the revenue model, the no idea model, we say, well, there's this that is being proposed, but currently it's not very well implemented in that.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess that was also connected just generally to increasing taxes.
Yes.
Because if you're going to have non-workers, there should be like a minimum hour. I guess you can have a version of like, there's always supposed to be a minimum wage. Even if you somehow make a robot cost less, whatever is the difference between them should just be taxed.
There's a lot of, like that's a kind of governance solution that can try to get the best without getting the worst. And that is needed, and that's why we need to have this common language.
Well, a question, before you were talking about, robot as a tool, AI as a tool, and some effects that like Glenn was mentioning are more about how you use the tool. Can you might make the tool more effective, and it can be more effective for good or bad.
Yeah.
So with respect to the inhibitors, basically there's one detractor here. Can you walk us through how this point it seems like it doesn't, it's the odd man out with respect to a lot of the other points were very core to robotics, like they had something to do with robots. This seems like, while it's true, it's also not really very specific to robots. I mean, there isn't really an ideal model for revenue sharing regarding any technology. So how come this one, like why was it important to identify this?
Because it's actually a very big factor currently in a lot of countries where you have automation of plants. And that does make that some people lose their jobs, while the people who run the plants, the companies, keep on making revenue. So it is currently a significant phenomenon. So we need to talk about it. And yeah, I do think that it's actually quite important regarding robots in particular, because robots do take the job, like physical jobs that are usually taken by low education workers. And so it is specific to robots. I don't think you can say the same thing for many technologies. There's something that other technologies, not only robots, but there's a specific thing to robots that works there.
But is it part of your question that like the solution to this, not a robotic solution, I feel the inhibitor here, but the other ones you could even try to apply robotics, try to like reduce e-waste. Some other ones. This one
you could like design a robot that is uses different materials or has some other way of functioning.
Or is good at picking apart robots.
This one
this
clearly
is,
we
like,
need to start a
not
collaboration
solvable by
with
robots.
people in this area to actually help with this inhibitor.
Yeah.
I can't talk to robotics people.
No, and I don't think the whole analysis is not made only for robotics people to find robotic solutions to the problems. There's a lot of it that needs to be multidisciplinary discussion if you want to just talk about both in an academic way and to understand what's happening, but also in the governance or in companies in the industry. Everywhere you need this kind of robotics people that understand what's happening technically and the ones who are the ones who design these things, but also other people that understand what are the effects, and how can we actually make governance or other kind of processes to ensure that, or to minimize the inhibiting effects.
I feel like robots are talked about as tools a lot of the time, but I think they're more like labor replacement solutions more than anything else. Like we can do everything that robots do nowadays. There's a very few robots that do something we can't do.
I semi disagree. So I agree on a lot of things. I think, for example, for monitoring in hard to reach places, there's no one who can go very, very deep or who can like fly around. There's some things that.
But I mean specifically for like the industry and stuff like that. Like they're mostly labor replacement, so it makes sense to talk about policy making instead of more robotics to solve it.
Okay. Yes.
I don't know if people do any kind of studies on the mental health impact of, I would say not just robotics, but generally in AI. Like if tomorrow everyone is out of job and you have UBI, let's say everyone is getting money, but you have nothing to do, basically no purpose, because everything you do, something like a robot can do better, and like industries are like just hiring, like have robots for everything. So basically your life is empty. You like normally what we use to distract ourselves every day is gone, right? Basically. So then, like, even if with money, what will you do with it? Like,
even if I had UBI, the amount of things I try to do with my time is pretty endless. So even if I had that, I'd probably fill myself up on some other things.
Because you have a purpose, right?
To worry about starving. That would be nice.
No, but
but you have a purpose. No?
But you would just pick up like painting or piano or something actually fun instead of like selling your soul to company for money.
That was the early reason why we started like having farming and stuff, and then we can afford to have people that make art. We'll probably just amplify.
I think, but there's always a need to be like, there's a need for approval which humans have, which is like, I can do something which has an impact on, but after a point when robots start making themselves better, then you don't have any impact, like, and what.
It's a very interesting conversation, but I think we have a few SDGs left, so I suggest we get back to the plot.
It is necessary to think about that too, I think, especially when we talk about like decent job, decent work and everything in this part. But as you said, there's a couple of other things that I like to mention really quickly. The one about hunger. This one is actually, there's both inhibiting thing and enabling. Especially, hunger is really about agriculture, pretty much. And so, first of all, it can increase productivity in agriculture, which is good because it can increase profits, farmers' livelihoods, reduce the food the cost of food. But it can also reduce the environmental impacts of agriculture, so make it more sustainable through precision, vertical farming, and talk about it, pixel cropping too. On the other hand, if it's not used correctly, and that maybe can come from the discussion we had a bit before, it can also increase the environmental impacts of agriculture through encouraging monocultures, entrenching land degradation, supporting deforestation, and also lead to inequalities in the agriculture economic model by capital accumulation and exploitation of margin. Yeah.
Just how do you factor in transportation for this? So there's like agriculture and then how you get it.
Yeah.
So is that in a different bin?
I think there's a transportation.
I think we talk about it. We try to put this more into the sustainable consumption or production. But we talk about the food waste and everything there. But yeah, maybe there's a blind angle there that we didn't cover. Okay. Good health and well-being. Then it's really about like using robots for healthcare. There's a lot of inhibitors. There's really few inhibitors. And mainly it's like, but first of all in the medical field, but also prevention from injuries and helping recovery. So with exoskeleton, autonomous cars, prosthetic robots, and also increasing access to healthcare by telemedicine robots that you can have a robot in your home that helps you with the healthcare, or drone delivery of things in case of disasters or in places that are hard to reach otherwise by healthcare providers. Education, this one I really don't like the results of methodology. Sometimes you have a methodology and things don't apply very well. Here we have very strong enabling, no inhibitor. I do not see any inhibitor, but I don't understand why we got such a high enabling topic there. The reason why was that if you try to teach robotics, you bring together several fields. That's quite interesting. You have electromechanics, computer science, engineering. It's also allows innovating learning methods, challenge-based, game-based learning, hybrid robot setups, we know it very well with the GitHub, for example, and I think, yes, indeed, it's quite interesting, but I would not put it all the way to 44%. So that's also a place where we can see that our methodology wasn't very great regarding the numbers, but I think it's an interesting thing, but it's not so related in the robotics to education. Gender equality, this one is also, we have very strong numbers, but I still think that while the numbers are a bit too strong, it's quite interesting. So the good thing is helping women integrate traditionally male-dominated labor markets, usually through human-robot collaboration or exoskeletons, especially when these labor markets are the ones that require physical strength that usually is a bit more for men, or said so. And the other one is to also allow women to better access the paid labor market, because in the world, unfortunately, women are usually traditionally performing the unpaid work at home and using robots to automate that, for example, to clean or to fold clothes, whatever. This can really help women to access the paid labor market. That was the good thing. On the other hand, robots, if they become like the norm, they can be ill-designed for women needs. For example, if having exoskeletons and they need to be designed for one's body, and also just the fact that you have a small proportion of women in the robotics team, that means a lack of diversity and less inclusive products, and including the needs of women are not always considered when making robots. And you can also reinforce existing gender stereotypes through the way robots are usually personalized. They're attributed a name, a voice, a gender, and often that plays on stereotypes, and you can go all the way to sexual robots that are actually very present, and they can also be part of this both of driving gender equality. Affordable and clean energy, and here I have a shameless plug. There's Steven presenting an internship about using robots for Hydro-Quebec. Here we can use robots in order to automate sustainable energy sources, which are actually distributed systems. So monitoring and inspecting, maintenance, automating repairs of small defects, so sure robots do that. But we need energy for robots to work, so that's also good. I'm going to go very fast because we're nearly towards the end. Sustainable citizen communities, that's mainly through transportation, make cities cleaner and make them more resilient. But it can also increase congestion if we use autonomous cars, reduce air quality, raise significant issues. Yeah, I will take the question afterwards if you agree. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. This one is also very interesting because it's a lot about military robots, and that's a very tough topic to talk about. The good things, so you see it's both inhibitor. The good thing that it can do, the first one that is clearly good is reduce the impact of wars through a robot that finds mines, and that's really, really important. Help victims also sometimes. Help keeping peace through information gathering, that's an argument that can be taken, that can be agreed on through surveillance, targeted execution, reconnaissance. Sometimes assist peacekeepers, such as police officers, to monitor or even detain threatening individuals. And if you see it on this point of view, it does make sense and it helps. And you can even go all the way to provide low budget balance of military power. That's something, for example, in Ukraine right now, they build like a lot of drones that allow to kind of balance against higher military power. That's also something that can be seen as be part of peace, justice, and strong institutions, depending on which side you're on. On the other hand, there's a lot of significant ethical and accessibility challenges about privacy. When it's about intelligence, use of force by robots is something that is very strongly that brings a lot of reactions, and the autonomous decision to take a human life is something that we're not come to agree with yet, and I hope that that's going to stay like this, personally. There's also increase of potential for violent groups because these are low-cost, dangerous weapons, such as drones, so it's kind of the other side of the medal of this one. And one of the specific challenges that we see is that one of the major contributors for robotics research is actually the military, in the US especially. And so that's really something that is a challenge in this kind of research. So, overall, in a general trend, we saw that we can enable 46% of the targets, we inhibit 19%. More interestingly, the general trends for enabling many things is increased productivity, infrastructure maintenance, human-robot collaboration, and monitoring. These are the main tasks that we can see that really help. Whereas 90% of the inhibiting is mainly exacerbation of inequalities and tensions about the SDGs, and we're going to talk about it a bit afterwards. And in order for the robots to be part of the solution of these complex global problems, what we think that in order to design them correctly, we need kind of some interdisciplinary systemic thinking in order to, like in the way we approach problem solving, in order to take into account all of these if we want actually to tackle one particular SDG. You talked about it before, Elena, the limitations. For sure, first of all, it's an approximative task. There's a lot of methodological choices. An assumption that every target is equally important to the problem. It gave some really weird thing at some point. There's a strong analytical bias towards higher enabling effects. There's reasons for that. First of all, because publication of companies usually, so the sources that we got, usually they highlighted that the desired positive effects, but also because the negative impacts are usually unintended outcomes that need to be discovered through specifically designed long-term studies. In order to have them, to see them, is really harder. And also there's a challenge with deployability. Sometimes you have prototype that work, that is fun, but robotics is expensive. You need to pass through what we call valley of death to actually be able to actually get to deployment. And that's really, that's something that we didn't really manage to take into account. Yeah.
I guess, did you have like a third-party person kind of review your methodology? If everyone on the designing this is a robotics person, you might have an interest to make robotics sound good.
Yeah, we had one or two people that were more in sociological, like in sociology, that were the ones who helped us design the methodology. But for sure, like the people who were evaluating were robotics people, so yes, there's this bias too also in who we were. Like I think we could kind of here, it's a subjective nature of grading. People who grade were roboticists, mainly. We tried to have a double revision process, but still, it's not perfect. There's a bias there for sure. We talked about the contradiction between the SDGs. There's different examples. I'm going to put two there. Robots at the workplace. You have economic growth, reduce poverty, but you have inequality, job market disruptions, and poverty. So you have sometimes like extension. Same for agricultural robots. It can help feed the increasing human population, but if it results in monoculture paradigm that threatens biodiversity and agriculture on the long term. So you have also like this kind of tension between the SDGs, and there's nothing you can do about it. The SDGs themselves, the framework, has these tensions in between. But it also shows the dual impact of technology, which is very known. It's not the first time we discovered this thing, but what we really think is, and we talk about it a bit, is that it's really important to have some policy to trade off these impacts. And to do it correctly, us as robotics experts, I think we have a role, which is to inform society and policymakers of what it can do and what are the impacts, but also, to develop this discussion in order for the governance to be done correctly. To be done correctly. Finally, just to say, for example, the SDGs, they're useful, but they're not enough. Not only there's some tensions, but there's not enough. There's a lot of things that were not considered. For example, all the ethical aspects of technology. We talked a bit about it regarding peacekeeping, but otherwise everything about privacy, autonomy, responsibility, transparency, all these things, they're not part of the SDGs, and there are important aspects that also need to be taken into account when we evaluate the impact of the technology. So as a conclusion, and I know that took a bit more time, but I think it shouldn't be too bad. This was actually quite a fun work to do. I discovered a lot of applications and other things. And hopefully it is also useful, the paper that I published, in inspiring ideas for research projects, in identifying potential issues with other projects, and also raise awareness about the SDGs in the community. And thanks to Bing, I'm having a very nice picture. Personally, also it helped me give a bit more sense to my previous work as a researcher. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have any more questions, discussion.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Vincent. Let's just maybe have a quick look at chat. Okay. Tassin, question maybe? Tassin?
Yeah. I said I switched devices and it seems I deleted my message. Yeah, I was asking that when you were talking about industrial and people losing their jobs. So from the region I come from, there are like a lot of the countries close there don't have a lot of natural resources, but don't have like personnel. So in those cases, yeah, robots would somewhat as would be better to like jumpstart the industry. So in those cases, wouldn't it go more for enabling than an inhibitor for robots to like dominate the industrial sort of I guess industry?
Yeah, so it was a bit hard to understand what you said, but because the microphone is not great, but if I understood well, say in cases where you have labor shortage, when you don't have workforce, then it can be a good thing, actually. Instead of making people lose their job, it can actually help the industries and make the community more prosperous. Do I understand correctly?
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think we put it a bit in the industry part. I think it's go back in economy here when you say feel the need of skilled workers when facing labor shortages. Maybe we could remove skill and just put feel the need of workers when facing labor shortages. But definitely, robots can help to do that. They do in a lot of places. I know in Japan, for example, they did automate a lot of their industry because the population getting older and do not have a lot of workers. So definitely, it's a thing. And the example we gave, which I was not aware of, but makes a lot of sense too. Absolutely, in that case.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? All right, let's call it. Thank you, Vincent. That was a great talk.